they can be very helpful, I mean, for that, for the practice, absolutely, of course.
The second question is, when would you suggest to start doing a little bit of Vipassana? I mean, you wisely advised to do Shamatha and before measurable, but...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so the question is, when should we begin to do Vipassana practice? I mean, of course, that depends on us as an individual, and it depends basically what level of concentration we've got. I mean, if our concentration skills are very poor, I think you can put a lot of effort into Vipassana and not really get anywhere. So, you know, you may try to do some Vipassana, and then after some time you realise it's not really working. So then you go, okay, I need to go back and work on my Shamatha a bit more, and then I'll come back and see if there's any progress. But what you'll find, of course, is that if you have a sort of a basic level of concentration ability, and you enter into Vipassana practice, and you have some experience or progress, that will also feed back into the Shamatha, because that is going to sort of reduce mental afflictions a bit, which means when you go into your Shamatha practice, you'll have probably less dullness and distraction because of that. That will increase, and then you go into Vipassana, that will increase, and that, so they'll work together, feed each other.
And about the third mark of existence, which is suffering, how do you...
Third? Second?
It's the second, that we didn't do it. I mean...
the meditation? No. Yeah, there are many ways of looking at that. The presentation that we gave briefly was the three types, the suffering, the change, the pleasant, and the all-pervasive. So just to reflect on those three, and then there's other presentations called the 6 types and 8 types of suffering that you find in like the Lam Rim presentations. So there are many ways of approaching that, and we can use one or more of those approaches and just reflect on that. So again, it's just to really appreciate the human condition. So there are a number of different ways of doing that, and we just presented one very brief way. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll finish for the evening.
It's about emptiness.
Sure.
And the connection to good and bad.
The what?
To good and bad.
The connection to it?
Well, like, because if everything is, maybe you'll say it's nihilism, but if you say that everything is empty,
Right.
then...
Therefore, everything matters.
Yes, because everything is dependent, I understand that. But I'll rephrase it.
Sure.
If I say, okay, I can reflect on, let's say, disease, okay? It doesn't have an inherent meaning of something bad.
Nothing has an inherent anything.
Exactly. So it's only what I impose on disease.
But it has to be in line with reality. I mean, we can project all sorts of things onto that, but that doesn't make it so. You know, we can say, oh, that's bad. That doesn't make it bad.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, usually we think about disease, it's bad, right? But what I'm saying is, it isn't bad from its own side. It's bad because I label it as bad, right? So what I'm saying is, I can also say from a different perspective, disease is amazing. Maybe this is what will bring somebody to burn karma. Maybe this is what will bring somebody to wake up and do spiritual work, okay? So So what I'm saying is, how can we talk about bad and good when there is no inherent meaning in things?
Because bad and good exists within conceptual framework, and they are concepts that we develop, and if we apply them properly, they can help us to improve and avoid the negative behaviour. So it's just like everything. But of course, if we don't use it appropriately or correctly, then of course we're just fabricating.
But aren't we strengthening or reinforcing illusionary, like something illusionary if we say this is good and this is bad? You know what I'm saying? aren't we reinforcing?
Again, it has to have a basis in reality. You can't say, it's good to engage in harmful behaviour. So I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think what's the attitude towards the thing, no?
But it's not just our attitude. It has to be in line with reality. We could be delusional and think something is good or worthwhile when it's actually harmful. So just because we think it's good because we're delusional doesn't make it good. Is that the question?
I'm not sure.
I think what's missing is that the labeling has to be made on something which is valid.
Well, it has to be, like I said, it has to be in.
You can't just label everything.
No, that's what I mean. It has to be. I mean, you can't sort of label this like a dog or something. That's not in line with reality.
Yeah.
So it has to be in line with reality.
I think
Well, what is
what's the
reality?
difference is some things are objects, like the disease is an object, but good and bad can be related to actions. And actions and intentions, you can see whether your intention was good or bad.
Yeah, I understand about
Yeah.
intentions, but I don't know about like things in the world like disease, like hunger, like like even suffering. Suffering is also a good
Yeah,
thing.
but remember, just because we can learn from something doesn't mean it was good or virtuous. So I think you're mixing between something that is helpful or beneficial versus something which is virtuous. So, in fact, a lot of our suffering we can learn from, but that doesn't make it good. It just means it's helpful to learn from. So I think maybe you're mixing those two things together, between good and useful.
Well, good is a very general.
Yeah,
right?
so I was assuming you meant the word good meaning virtuous and bad meaning non-virtuous. But if you mean good meaning helpful, then of course everything can be helpful because we can learn from everything. In fact, we learn the most often from our suffering.
Yeah, that's what.
So in fact, in the Buddhist text, we often talk about the 5 qualities of suffering. 5 ways in which we can learn from suffering. But that doesn't mean suffering is something virtuous.
Yeah, I didn't,
So I think it's just,
I didn't versus I didn't get in that. But
yeah, sure. Yeah, so it's important.
So just sum it up. So
Yeah.
so we can't say things. We cannot say things are good and bad from their own side.
Well, nothing's...
Only what we do with them.
Yeah, but it has to be in sync with reality. If we're delusional, we can delusionally think something's virtuous when it's not. So that's the key. Yeah, okay. Fine. Okay, last question, then we stop.
You mentioned a few days ago the word analytical meditation.
Correct.
But I don't remember that you
Right, yeah.
elaborate. Can you say it please?
So the question is, I mentioned analytical meditation a few days ago, but I don't seem to have used that here now. But we can talk about shamatha is what's called stabilizing meditation, to stabilize the mind. And then on that basis, we can engage in what's called analytical meditation. So analytical meditation just means to analyze, to investigate. And so, of course, Vipassana is one example of that. We are analysing, we're investigating how things exist. So Vipassana practice is analytical meditation. But also compassion practice is analytical, because in compassion practice, we are analysing and investigating the situation of ourselves and others, and from that, developing compassion or loving kindness. So any meditation where we are investigating is analytical. So both Vipassana and the compassion practices, bodhicitta, are classed as analytical because we are investigating something. Of course, the goal of the Vipassana practices when we investigate is to gain insight. The goal of the analytical practices of the 4 immeasurables is to develop qualities, positive qualities such as loving kindness and compassion. And we develop those through seeing the situation of ourselves and others and so forth.
So analytical is the opposite of shamatha?
Not the opposite, but we do analytical on the basis of shamatha, because to analyse, to investigate, we need to be very focused and clear.
Yeah.
So shamatha is the basis for analytical meditation. Yeah.
Which you can do about any subject, my
Anything.
relationship with my children.
Sure, absolutely. Anything. Anything where you investigate to come to some insight or to come to some better understanding or positive quality, this is all analytical. Okay, let's leave it there. Let's do the Shavasana meditation.